What's happening, Stokastic baseball fans? Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the next to last day of the regular season of the baseball season. It's been a long, wild ride, but we're almost done. Tomorrow's going to be a weird slate. Everything's starting up at 4 o'clock. So this is really our last evening slate of the regular season tonight, too. So definitely get your lineups in. Got some relatively solid prize pools from site to site. We've got some different slates from site to site. We'll get into that. We've got a scrapped game already to talk about. So I'm here with Adam Scherer. This is the MLB Strategy Show, and we're going to talk through all of this stuff game by game. We're brought to you by our pals over at PrizePicks. Adam, how you doing, buddy?
Doing pretty well. Small showdown win last night, so that was nice to end.
Very nice.
A losing streak at least a little bit. Not that it, cuts into too much, but nice to finish there. Baseball was kind of just whatever. So, looking forward to closing out the baseball season strong, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was hunting that elusive last win of the baseball season last night. I had 5 or 6 lineups in the top 25 on FanDuel, and I just couldn't get one of them there. It was pissing me off. Had the opposite experience in football, just got wiped out completely. So baseball paid for football for me. Sounds like the opposite happened for you, But that works out nicely sometimes. We appreciate everybody coming and hanging out. Make sure you hit the like, the subscribe, all of that stuff. We're going to go game by game here. I'm just getting over to our YouTube channel so that I can pull up the chat and I can see all your great questions if we have any. Looks like we got now I'm talking over myself. Got about 49 people out there watching, so we'll let a few people trickle in as we start the show here. But like I said, hit the like, hit the subscribe. We got free stuff over at the site. What do we have? Top stacks PG for baseball and PGA golfer rankings today are both free. And for the last 2 days of the MLB slate, and probably just today, because I don't think there's going to be a night owl slate tomorrow. So 100% free tonight for any kind of DraftKings night owl night slate action over at the site. You can check out projections, top stacks, all that stuff for the DK night owl for free last day of the season. If there are through the playoffs, if there are night slates like that, maybe, but I think those will all be too small. So we'll see what happens there. We'll talk some about PrizePicks a little bit later on. We'll talk about the promo code MLB Strategy Show, all that good stuff. But Adam, I think easy place to start with different slates from site to site. We've got the Yankees and Texas second game is on the DK slate, but not on the FanDuel slate. DK also has the Mets game listed, the second Mets game listed, but it will not be scoring for that slate. So a couple important wrinkles there as we talk from site to site. Anything that you spotted other than the fact that the weather on the East Coast is also still pretty miserable? It's 48 degrees and pouring rain.
No, that's what I was going to say. Was this is another slate where we need to pay attention to weather. Obviously, we lost the Mets game yesterday. The Orioles game ended up mostly working out. It got called in like the 8th inning. But it's another one where it looks like we're going to have to pay attention to it. Right now, it's raining in Baltimore. Obviously, don't know what it's going to be doing in 9 hours or whatever. But definitely going to need to pay attention to that. Going to need to pay attention to Boston. If you're playing a slate that has the Mets second game, you're going to need to pay attention to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm looking out my window right now and I'm starting to think that Vladimir Putin stole the sun like Mr. Burns or blocked the sun like Mr. Burns, because I haven't seen it in a couple of days. It doesn't look like it's out right now. I'd be concerned about that game if it weren't, toward the end of the season here. Like, they're going to have to get these games in. Baseball can, add a couple of, they have a couple of days before the playoffs start, so they can get these games done if they need them. But with things kind of locked in, like playoff wise, everything got set playoff wise outside of a couple seeding issues last night. Is there anything that you're looking at specifically as far as that goes outside of, what impact of any postponements or anything?
No, not specifically. I mean, I think that it's like kind of just generally it'll add some risk to pitchers probably, because we've talked about it a lot where teams like the Astros, they're not necessarily going to pull guys early. We haven't really seen them do that, but there's always like a non-zero chance that teams that have nothing to play for will just be like, all right, cool, like we're treating this more like a 75-80 pitch like live bullpen session than an actual competitive game. But I don't think you can do too much with that information unless you get an announcement beforehand, because every team is in the same position basically, whether they have the playoffs locked up, whether they're not playing for anything. You just get a little bit of increased volatility, I think, which of course we don't really need in MLB. We already have plenty of it, but I think it just kind of adds risk to everybody, but at the same time, there's not a lot you can do about it. The nice thing is, we talked about it. Somebody had asked yesterday if we thought the Mariners, for lack of a better word, would like tank that game for better seeding. The nice thing with baseball is that outside of the pitching, where they can kind of just do random stuff at times if they want. They give you a starting lineup, so like you know who's playing. It's not like NBA where you have to guess like, oh, okay, well they're starting these guys, but are they going to play 6 minutes and then just never come back into the game or something like that? So you don't have to worry about standings and seating and all that nearly as much in baseball as you do in other sports.
Yeah, it's also really difficult to tell if somebody's intentionally tanking in baseball because like the default position is failure, like success is the rarity. So it's weird.
Nobody's going out there trying to lose. Like if you're gonna, it's the same as any other sport. If you're gonna tank, you're just not gonna play your best players, which goes back to the starting lineup. Like in that Mariners example,
and we would know
Julio Rodriguez is playing. I don't think they're trying to lose.
Right. Yeah. I heard you say that on the show yesterday. Yeah, that was dead on. I mean, putting that kid back in the lineup right off the injured list, that made all the sense in the world. So I guess the theme, the idea there would be to move up to play to move down rather. So they would play the Guardians instead of the Blue Jays. Is that the thinking behind that question?
I wasn't really paying attention to the actual standings. I think that was my guess of what it would be, because I know like when the Orioles were in the postseason race, the conversation was kind of like, they could actually advance pretty far too, because like they would get the Guardians out of the gate potentially, and they're better than the Guardians. So like that would be my assumption. It's just
makes sense.
Cleveland.
Yeah. So that one looks like it's basically the Rays are a game and a half back now for that spot, and they've got 2 or 3 to play. So that one's basically decided. The closer one is the Padres and the Phillies. The Phils locked up the spot last night, but they can still catch the Padres. And that's the difference between playing the Mets and the Cardinals. Any lean there? I mean, I can't really imagine there's a huge swing in, what you would think of those two matchups.
Yeah, I doubt it matters.
Yeah. All right, let's dive into the game by game of it. Then we touched on the weather up top on the Orioles game here in Baltimore, but we've got the Blue Jays taking on the Orioles in Baltimore. Mitch White going for the Blue Jays. Mike Baumann answering back for the Baltimore Orioles. 3.9 implied total for the Jays. 3.6, 3.7 for the Baltimore Orioles. What do we like about this one? Anything here for pitching?
Not much standing out pitching wise. Mitch White's done a decent job limiting power this year. He is only 5,500, but with it being a 10-game slate, I think you can probably find better pitching options. Strikeouts haven't really been there for him. 15% to lefties, 20% to righties. The Orioles lineup is solid, assuming they run a pretty normal lineup out there. A lot of left-handed power, which still plays well in Camden Yards, even though as a whole the park isn't great for hitting anymore. Left-handed power is still, nothing changed to the right field wall. So if I were going to one of these two, I think it would be White, just because he's probably a little bit better than Baumann. He's got a little bit better matchup against the Orioles, but chances are you're not going to need either one of these guys.
Yeah, we haven't really seen these like incredibly cheap value prices really matter all that much in the second half of this season with the way that the sites are pricing hitters and all of that. We've talked about it a ton. We don't have ownership up right now. It looks like if anybody behind the scenes is within the sound of my voice, we'll drop a note in the Slack as well. But ownership doesn't look like it ran correctly.
They said it's running, and we should have it.
It's running right now. Perfect. So that'll get updated in the next couple of minutes, gang, and we'll get some ownership on these things. But assuming neither of these guys are going to be heavily owned by the field, what are we doing with bats? Independent of attacking any kind of pitcher ownership, do we like bats in this spot?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, talking right now, independent of ownership, I do like both sides here. It's for the Blue Jays, you do have a lot of right-handed power, which we know doesn't play very well in Camden Yards, but it's still extremely good right-handed power. Mm-hmm. And you're going up against Mike Baumann, who is not a major league starting pitcher. It looks like from a career standpoint, at best, he's going to end up being a reliever most likely. And right now you just have him in the rotation because the Orioles have a bunch of injuries. They're not in the playoff race anymore. Who really cares? So far in a limited sample this year, he's been decent. 154 expected ISO to righties, 162 to lefties, not striking out a lot of guys, and just certainly tons of upside in this Blue Jays lineup. And then on the other side, I mentioned Mitch White's done a pretty good job limiting power this year, but I just still like the Orioles for the same reason that I have for most of the season. You get some MPE with Gunnar Henderson at third base shortstop. Taron Vavra, if he's in the lineup, has second base outfield eligibility. Outside of the top of the order, though, you also just get pretty cheap prices. Like Cedric Mullins is $5K. He deserves to be up there. Rutschman's expensive, as he should be. Same with Santander. And, that's relatively expensive. It's not even like they're north of $5K. But then you drop off of those guys and, Mountcastle $4,100, Henderson $4K, the rest of the lineup like $3,300 or less. So you get plenty of power upside from the Orioles with flexibility positionally and with cheap salaries. So I'm interested in the bats on both sides here if the weather cooperates.
Yeah, with you for sure. Assuming the weather, I took this game like I was telling you before the show. I took this one and the Mets game just out of my player pool crunching yesterday. I know you left this one in, and hopefully we get a little bit firmer, nice looking afternoon, and we can just confidently play it. I like both sides of it. I love the idea of just the contact that Bauman's going to allow to this team, and like you said, these writers are good enough that they can hit it out of any park. So I'll be happy to go to the Blue Jays, and then there's a lot of Orioles bats, particularly on FanDuel. You lose the multi position on those guys, but everybody's dirt cheap on FanDuel. Top 3 hitters are in the high to mid threes, and then everybody's in the twos. It's really easy to get to Orioles over there. So I'll definitely be getting to that lineup, probably 1 through 9. I mean, I like Kyle Stowers as a lefty bat with a little bit of pop. I like Jorge Mateo. I've been playing him all season for speed. So definitely a lineup I'll be barring a weather incident. I'm definitely going to be going with both of these teams. Let's move on. We'll talk about the Rays. Jeffrey Springs on the hill for the Rays, the lefty, taking on Nathan Eovaldi for the Red Sox. Can't speak this morning. Haven't had the caffeine really actually kick in. Let me try that again. Jeffrey Springs going for the Rays, 7,400 on DK, 8,000 on FanDuel. Nate Eovaldi going for the Red Sox, 8,100 on DK, 8,800 on FanDuel. What are we doing with pitching in this one?
Pitching here certainly looks more appealing than it did in that Baltimore game. Both of these guys are good. I don't know how Jeffrey Springs just continues to have mid 7K price tags. I get that it's not an ideal matchup against the Red Sox, but the guy's a legitimately good pitcher. And for a lot of the season, it's almost felt like, we talk about him from a DFS standpoint. It's like, oh yeah, he's, only 7,500 or he's only 8K or whatever it may be. And it comes off as like, he's a good play just because he's cheap, but he's like a legitimately good pitcher. He's got a 25.9% strikeout percentage, 3.33 xFIP. It is a negative park shift getting out of Tropicana and going into Fenway, but it's also supposed to be like 50, 55 degrees with the wind blowing in, so not as much of a concern. And on a side note, that applies to the Baltimore game as well, like 50 degrees, wind blowing in. Not ideal for hitting weather-wise either, but I just think Springs is a little bit underpriced. I'm really interested to see where his ownership comes in because, again, it's not an ideal matchup against the Red Sox, but he is a good pitcher and he doesn't have issues with right-handed bats either. Like you're probably going to get a right-handed heavy Boston lineup. This guy's got an elite changeup that he throws 44% of the time, has a 22.5% swinging strike percentage on the pitch, has nearly a 28% strikeout percentage against right-handed hitters overall this year with a 118 expected ISO. So it doesn't really set up as a bad matchup for him outside of the fact that, the Red Sox lineup is just talented in general. On the other side for Eovaldi, a little bit more expensive than Springs, does give up some power, 215 expected ISO to lefties, 184 to righties, but the weather should mitigate some of that. I think that he is a decent option here against Tampa, but between the two, I would expect to get the Springs first.
Any pitch count concerns on Springs? He's only been in the 80s the last 2 times out. It looks like playoffs or, other than seeding locked up for the Rays. And is he one of the guys that you'd maybe be a little bit more concerned about?
Yeah, like in the sense that I would prefer he, throw 90-something pitches, and I don't think it's likely that he will. But at the same time, I don't think he's really even been restricted. He hasn't really been that guy all season long. If you just go back through his DraftKings game logs to the start of the season, he's thrown over 100 pitches once. And when he throws over 90, it kind of stands out. So like if I knew for the way I view it is, if I knew for sure that Jeffrey Springs was throwing 80 to 90 pitches, I would view him the same way I have all season long. I think there's a non-zero chance that, you get the 5 innings and you're done no matter how many pitches you've thrown type of start. But that's going to be the case, I think, for enough pitchers today where it's not the most likely outcome, but it's a non-zero chance that it kind of just comes out in the wash. He's 7,400. I'm going to be interested in him.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, at that price, he's discounted on both sides. 8,000 on FanDuel is a nice price as well. You just, for whatever reason, like a pitcher with that kind of a strikeout rate, over 26% strikeout rate, just shouldn't be that cheap. The other side of Valdi is he's such an average-ish kind of a pitcher, and he gives up so much premium contact that I need more strikeouts from him. Last year, 25.5%. He was a little bit more viable and he was keeping the ball in the yard a lot better. This year, a 4.75% home run rate and a 45.7% hard hit with a 10.8% barrel and only 22% strikeouts. That just hurts. I don't love getting to Eovaldi, but he's cheap and he's, playable enough. 8,100, I guess you can get him into the mix on DK. It would depend on where the ownership falls, I think, for him, for me. What about Rays bats in this when you're getting to any of the Rays, some of that left-handed power?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. The issue I have with Tampa, it's twofold. One, the weather is not great for hitting. Two, Evaldi's given up power to both sides of the plate, but it has been more so to lefties. But this park, doesn't play as well for left-handed power as it does right-handed power. You also don't really have left-handed power in this lineup. G-Man Choi at 2,400 looks fine. Wander Franco's a switch hitter. He's going to look pretty good. But it's tough to like really single out guys that I like. It's more so that there's some appealing pricing and MPE. Wander Franco at shortstop is just going to, again, look like a good play. Vidal Brujan led off yesterday. Don't know where he'll be in the lineup today, but he's second base outfield and really cheap, so he potentially looks good. Rosarena looks fine. Right-handed power, plays well in Fenway. But yeah, it's kind of just a weird spot where I like the idea of trying to pick on Evaldi because of the power issues he has, but the weather helps downplay that, and the fact that Tampa Bay's lineup just isn't very good. At least they're weird. Like I've had a hard time describing them all season because they're not bad offensively.
Right.
But when you try and point to individual hitters, it's just like, oh well, I don't.
It's Wander Franco and a bunch of guys, or Wander and Randy Rosarena maybe and a bunch of guys, but they make it work. I mean, time and again. And this is how they build their teams down there and how they execute. They're really interesting, advanced thinking kind of a ball club. But it's not a lot of standout guys. You can maybe get some of the power out of G-Man. You can maybe get a little pop out of Jonathan Arando, who's got a 43.1% hard hit, but it's only in 81 plate appearances. So can't really give that all that much credence. Wander Franco, Randy Rosarena are my target guys there. What about on the Red Sox side of things going up against Springs? You taking any shares of Red Sox bats here?
If I get to them in stacks, if they're low owned, I think that's okay just because they're a good offense. But Springs isn't somebody that I'm going out of my way to target. Again, really good job limiting power, favorable pitching conditions, really good pitcher in general. Like if they're low owned, then I get some Boston. I'm sure I've stacked against better pitchers than Springs this year, but it's not a spot that I'm seeking out.
Makes sense. Yeah, a couple shares around the edges. And then for me, the oddball Bobby Dahlbeck's from down in the lineup. If he's down there, he's in the projected today. So we'll see what I get to there. But not one I'm really going to go hunting for. We can move on. We'll knock out one more, then we'll do a piece of business. Arizona Diamondbacks with Zach Gallen on the mounds, 9,400 on DK, 10.5 on FanDuel. Eric Lauer, the lefty, going for the Brewers on 8,800 on DK, 9,900 on FanDuel. Projects out nicely for me today, so I'm curious to see what you think of Lauer. But let's start with Gallen. What are you doing with Zach Gallen on the mound for the Diamondbacks?
I think he looks pretty good here. 9,400 is a reasonable price tag. You've got strikeouts in the Milwaukee lineup. Obviously, a lot of power as well. But Gallen's a good pitcher. 26.9% strikeout percentage is the same as Justin Verlander this year. 3.27 xFIP. He's pitched really well down the stretch also. The park isn't ideal for pitching, but like I said, there are strikeouts here. He is a good pitcher. I think he looks like a solid pitching option.
Yep. I agree with that. And I'm kind of hoping he becomes one of those guys today where that 10-5 maybe scares a little bit of ownership off of him on FanDuel, and I can pick him off a little bit low owned. We'll see where that comes in. Last I checked, the ownership update hasn't dropped yet, but hopefully in the next little bit, they'll get that whatever bug is going on back there figured out. Let's talk Eric Lauer. He's relatively affordable on FanDuel at 99. He's at a fairly nice price at 88 on DK, 23.5% strikeout rate for the season. Decent little season, but not like a big time upside pitcher. But for me, he's projecting like it. I'm curious where you're getting him in this matchup against the Diamondbacks.
I think it's kind of a neutral spot. I don't like taking pitchers against Arizona all that much just because they've gotten a better lineup. Having a lefty, I think, is a little bit more appealing because like Jake McCarthy's left-handed, Corbin Carroll is left-handed, Pavin Smith's left-handed. So you're probably going to get the right-handed heavy lineup that then they start pinch hitting later in the game. But you're going to have, Stone Garrett, who's been good. Probably Jordan Luplow, Buddy Kennedy will probably be in there since Emmanuel Rivera broke his wrist, I believe. So I do think you probably get a little bit weaker Arizona lineup in terms of talent than you do against right-handed pitching. Lauer is kind of just middle of the pack in strikeout percentage this year at 23.5%, 4.07 xFIP. Right now we have him projected reasonably well at like 15.5 DraftKings points. The issue that I see is just that like that's a similar projection to somebody like Springs, who's $1,400 less. We have a similar projection on Lorenzen, who's a lot less expensive. Jameson Taillon is similarly projected. Not sure if he's on the other.
He's in the early game, I think.
Yeah,
I had Cole for the second game.
Yeah, Cole for the second game. So never mind on him. But the point being, like, I think, again, we don't have ownership, so I don't know for sure. My guess is you're not going to get much ownership coming into Lauer, and he's going to look like a reasonable tournament pivot, if you have popular hitters and you want a good enough pitcher at low ownership. I don't think he's somebody that I end up going out of my way to target at this price just because I'm going to like some other pitchers better, like Gallen on the other side for 600 more.
Yeah, I'm really curious. It's going to be one where I think the ownership, like if he comes in super low on, that might make me a little bit more interested, and it might make me chase where he's projecting out for me. I also need to just check where his innings are coming in, because he did just come in. He was 60 pitches, 66 pitches, 71 pitches, only 2 2/3, 2 starts in on the 7th and the 23rd, 2 appearances. And then on the 29th, his most recent appearance, he went 5, struck out 9 through 71 pitches, but it was against the Marlins. Just, you like the strikeout upside from that start, but the depth may not be there necessarily. So yeah, I'm just going to I'm going to probably temper that a little bit where I'm getting him right now, but we'll see where he comes in on ownership and anything. What about
that last one's kind of concerning to me, just because like the one where he threw 66 pitches, he also, went 2 2/3, gave up a couple earned runs. Seems like, maybe he was just taken out because he wasn't pitching that well.
Yeah, and on the 7th, he gave up 7 earned runs in his 2 2/3 the game before that. So,
but like 71 pitches, 1 hit, 5 innings. That's kind of a red flag. Like I would expect he's probably throwing, 80-ish.
Yeah, and like you said before, with the the guys with the playoff concerns and everything, like there's a lot of these guys, and it's just kind of in the bag for a lot of them today. So unless we get news, I don't know that we adjust too much for it, but I'll probably personally adjust downward just because he looks like he's projecting oddly high for me. What are you thinking about Diamondbacks bats? You talked about some of the righties that are going to be in the lineup. You talked about the potential downgrade for some of the lefties who you usually get there. Are you going to any Diamondbacks bats against Lauer?
I don't think so. I kind of hope not. When they're facing left-handed pitching these days, they kind of remind me of when the Giants are facing left-handed pitching, because they have good left-handed bats and they're probably not going to start. So it's just like very obvious pinch hitters that they can get to later in the game if they want to. So it makes it like a really tricky situation, because Stone Garrett's been solid this year. $3,300 price tag's reasonable. I assume he's going to be leading off. He's going to look like a good value, but what happens in the 5th inning when he's facing a Milwaukee reliever, the 6th inning when he's facing a Milwaukee reliever, does he stay in the game? Same goes for Jordan Luplow at 2,500. He's going to project as a good value if he's hitting in the middle of the order, but how many at-bats is he really going to get? And then once you get towards the bottom of this order, it's not really that appealing. I do think if you are going to them, going to whatever lefties are in the starting lineup is an appealing strategy, because obviously they're not worried about them in the lefty-lefty matchup if they're starting them. So say, for example, Corbin Carroll starts. He doesn't come with any pinch hit risk. He's a very good hitting prospect, and he's probably going to be low-owned just because he's facing the lefty. So like if I were stacking Arizona, I would want to probably include whatever of the left-handed talent is in the starting lineup. But overall, from a stacking standpoint, I think you just need to pay attention. Or understand there's some risk coming with it. Especially Garrett and Luplow, I think carry pinch hit risk. Like Carson Kelly, you're not worried about. Christian Walker, you're not worried about. Those guys are going to play no matter what. But Garrett and Luplow specifically, I think you have to be a little bit concerned.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And those guys will probably be hitting up toward the top of the lineup. So you'll have a lot of issues with that if they do get pinch hit for and you're only stacking up toward the top. I do love the idea of getting to Corbin Carroll here. 2,900 on DK, 27 on FanDuel, over 106 plate appearances. The kid's at 260, 330, 469 with a 208 ISO, creating runs 22% better than average. And that's all with only a 31.8% hard hit and a 4.5% barrel rate. Wait till he actually starts making premium contact. This is going to be a nice bat. What about Brewers on the other sides? Obviously a decent lineup going here with a couple fairly high-end bats in it, but we both agree Gallen, very good pitcher on the other side. Taking any shares of Brewers here?
Probably not. I mean, they're an offense that I never minded if I get to them at low ownership in tournaments just because there is power. But Gallen is just a good pitcher that I don't really want to go out of my way to pick on. 139 expected ISO to righties this year with a 25% strikeout percentage. 107 expected ISO to lefties with a 29% strikeout percentage. Just a good pitcher that outside of, randomly throwing Milwaukee power into a lineup here and there, I don't have much interest in targeting against.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think pretty much everybody knows who the key bats are there if they do just randomly decide to grab some of those shares of Brewers. So not all that much to dive into here. Let's do a quick piece of business. I'm sure I was supposed to talk about something already. Promo code MLB Strategy Show. That's a long one. It's all one word. It's all caps. It's MLB Strategy Show. It's the name of the show that you're currently watching about the MLB. That'll get you access to all the great Stokastic tools and content for nearly every DFS sport out there if you join up on a Stokastic Plus Platinum plan. What the promo code is for 50% off of your first week of that plan if you're a new subscriber. It's the first week of any of our weekly plans. So that's the Platinum plan. If you're crazy and you want to get the Baseball Weekly for just 1 or 2 more days, have at it. The NFL's going on, NHL starting up soon, NBA right behind it. So there's a lot going on. All of those things are included in the platinum plan. That's why that's the one to check out. It's every single tool, every single sport that we cover at the site, whether it's top stacks for football, whether it's the boom bust tool for basketball, which is a phenomenal piece of content. There's just so much going on behind the scenes. It makes sense to jump on the platinum plan. Promo code MLB Strategy Show, all one word, all caps. If you're a new subscriber, 50% off your first week of any of our weeklies. Does not include Fantasy Cruncher. That's always a paid add-on, and you have to add it after your first week is up. Join Stokastic Plus today. Check it out. It's linked down there, I'm sure, probably somewhere, or otherwise it's stokastic.com, and just look for the join page. Adam, let's talk about a game that is not on the FanDuel slate. My New York Yankees taking on the Texas Rangers. Garrett Cole, we think, going for the Yanks. John Gray, we think, going for the Rangers. Those are the listed starters. I suppose anything could happen, but I don't expect it to. What are you seeing here as far as Garrett Cole?
I think so. Is he not in our projections right now?
Not sure.
Okay. Yeah. So doesn't appear to be in there. He's going to project well. Like, I think that goes without saying. 32.2% strikeout percentage, 2.81 xFIP. Matchup against the Rangers is fine. They obviously have some talented bats in their lineup, but there are some strikeouts to be had as well. There's some concerns, I guess, how far do they push Cole? But again, that's just kind of going to be the case for everybody. I would expect that you're getting like mid 90s in pitches from him, maybe more if he's pitching really well and, can convince them to leave him out there. But I think he's just going to look like one of the best pitchers on the slate.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. We're talking about one of the best pitchers in the game, so he's probably going to project out well. Just looking at the board on talent, I mean, outside of, I would say, Verlander, he's probably 2 behind Verlander if we're just calling it pure talent and pure upside. And then it's just a matter of how deep he goes, how much ownership he's carrying at that 10-7 price as far as where he slots in DFS-wise. What about John Gray on the other side? I feel like Gray's kind of in the same boat as Springs, where 26% strikeout rate for 7,900 over on DK. That seems pretty cheap. I don't think John Gray's getting respect for the very nice season that he's turned in.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent there for a cheap price tag. Obviously it's a difficult matchup against the Yankees, depending on who's in the lineup. If you get the normal Yankees lineup, then yeah, it's a difficult spot. Gray is still a good pitcher at a reasonable price tag one way or the other. 26.3% strikeout percentage, 3.4 xFIP. He has the 5th highest strikeout percentage on the slate behind Rodon, Cole, Verlander, and Gallen, and he's just, a lot less expensive than any of those guys. So from a talent standpoint, I can see getting there, especially if he's not going to get much ownership, which I would expect that he probably isn't. Yeah, I like taking chances on him in tournaments. Also, there's a non-zero chance that you just get the shell of a Yankees lineup where you have like Aaron Judge and a bunch of backups that we've seen a decent amount lately. So if that were to happen, then obviously he's going to look even better.
Yeah, it could be a very ugly version of this Yankees lineup in the second game. Do you think Judge goes if he hits 62 in the afternoon?
If he hits 62, I don't know. If he doesn't, then absolutely yes.
Yeah, if he doesn't, he's definitely in the lineup. I think if he does, they might give him the night off. I think he does want to be out there and rack him up as many as he can. But I think one game off on a day of a doubleheader would be justifiable here.
Especially because 73 is far enough away that he's not getting there in the next game.
Yeah, he's not getting to the real record. So right. Yeah, no reason to push once he gets the AL record in the bag. Are we going to Yankee stacks? Like obviously, lineup dependent, but if it's a somewhat regular version of the lineup, are we going to Yankee stacks against Gray? And
if they're not popular, you can always get to the Yankees. Gray is not a pitcher that I'm looking at and saying, oh yeah, this is why I think the Yankees are going to do well, because it's pretty tough to come up with reasons why they would do well. But I think that if they run their normal lineup out there and if they're low owned, then sure. Gray himself, though, 139 expected ISO to righties this year, 131 to lefties. Lower strikeout percentage against lefties at only 22.5% compared to 29.5% against righties, but still not giving up a lot of power. And from a left-handed talent standpoint, pretty much all you have on this team is Rizzo and then, maybe Oswaldo Cabrera, but that hasn't really shown up yet. Yeah, it's just if you go to the Yankees, I think it's because A, they're low owned, and B, they're the Yankees and they're running out a solid lineup, which there's a decent chance is not the case.
Yeah, definitely one you want to wait on. And again, that one's on DK only. Any reason on DK to tackle the Rangers against Garrett Cole here? Like, let's say Cole comes out with like a 40% ownership tag. You want to take a few shares and try and attack a big swath of the field that's going to have them in their lineups, or are you just happy to take your Cole shares and
chances are I would just take Cole and move on. I don't hate the idea, though, in large field tournaments, if you did want to get to the Rangers, just because Cole has been home run prone this year, as good as he is. And really throughout his career, he's given up home runs, but he does give up power. The Rangers do have power in their lineup. Specifically, he's allowed a 196 expected ISO to lefties this year. He's also struck them out at like a 36% clip. But, you look at Corey Seager, you look at Nate Lowe, you look at Jonah Heim as a catcher, Cole Calhoun as a cheap outfield option. These guys all have power and have the ability to just run into one against Cole. So, it's kind of a spot where, in theory, I like it because, in lineups where you don't have Cole, you can grab one or two bats against him, hope to run into a home run. In practice, I probably just end up not really getting to it.
Yeah, I agree. I would probably not end up with much of it. And you mentioned the guys, primarily Corey Seager and those guys up toward the top that I would want to focus on. Maybe some Josh Young in the 5 spot down there. Maybe even some Cole Calhoun if I was getting really frisky and building a lot of actual stacks. The other notion I'm thinking is if we do get Cole short started here, you get into a pretty compromised version of this Yankees bullpen. So you could get interesting there, but you're kind of trying to tell yourself a story about that as you start building lineups there. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
To answer Mark Curry's question in chat, he said Judge not going to take a shot at catching the Twins player, which I don't even know who it is. I assume it's a Rise for average. That's a good point too. Like, hadn't put any thought into it because we will have the lineup and not have to guess on if he's going to play. But yeah, like that's certainly another narrative where maybe he does just play every game.
Yeah, I didn't actually realize that Arias had snuck ahead of him for batting average again, but yeah, he's obviously going to want to chase the Triple Crown if he's got a shot at it. So makes some sense. Let's take a look. We'll move on. We'll do another one. Then we'll talk about our great sponsors, PrizePicks. The Phillies with Ranger Suarez going against the Astros with Justin Verlander. Astros, nothing to play for. Verlander, obviously, a lot of arm issues over the last couple of years. Aging veteran, phenomenal, amazing pitcher, a precious gem that they want to protect for this playoff run. There's got to be a little bit of lingering concern about Verlander's innings here, but he doesn't need all that many innings to post a dominant start. We've seen him do it time and again. So I think he's on the board. Ranger Suarez is probably better than advertised in terms of keeping the ball in the yard, in terms of being a real life pitcher, but maybe not a lot of DFS upside. What are you doing with Suarez in this spot to start?
I wouldn't expect to really get the Suarez. Tough matchup against Houston. Again, depending on what lineup they run out there, you could certainly just see a watered down Houston lineup. I agree with you. He's good in terms of run prevention. He just doesn't really translate to being a great DFS pitcher because of the strikeouts. Only a 127 expected ISO to righties, sub 100 to lefties, but striking out less than 20% of hitters against both sides of the plate. And the issue is, it would be one thing if we were getting him at like a $7K or $7,200 price tag. We're getting him at a more expensive price tag than Jeffrey Springs. We're getting him at a more expensive price tag than John Gray. If I'm going to take a pitcher against a scary offense, I'm going to take one that has the strikeout upside that those guys offer, as opposed to one where, I'm hoping manages to somehow go 7 or 8 innings against the Astros.
Yep, absolutely with you on that. Only a 19.7% strikeout rate for the kid this year, and it's just a team that I don't like to attack. And more to the point that you were making, he's 9,200 on the FanDuel slate against the Astros. So just a hard pass for me. What are you doing with Verlander here? How concerned are you about innings? I know we've talked about it several times over, and it's kind of going to be the same answer. But is Verlander the most concerning guy as far as that innings thing goes?
Yes and no, because just thinking through it, I completely agree that he's risky. I also thought that last start, and then he went 7 innings on 101 pitches. So that one really surprised me, and it makes me not really know what to think here. So basically, I'm just still treating it the same as these other guys. My expectation is that you're getting like 6 innings from Verlander. Obviously, maybe they will just let him go out there for the 7th if he's pitching well and he wants to. But there's also a non-zero chance that you just get an abbreviated start. But the last start does give me, I don't even think confidence is the right word, a little bit more optimism that, they gave him a completely unnecessary 7th inning.
Yep. And it's, it's a manager who would certainly manage that way. And he'd be able to be talked into.
Dusty Baker never opposed to breaking, to ruining pitchers' arms.
Exactly. Yeah. So be on the lookout for that one tonight. Hopefully not. Knock on wood for Justin Verlander. What about Phillies bats against Verlander? I assume that's a no, not a pitcher I ever really like to target. Even if he's popular, I just don't need it.
Yeah, I don't see it. I'm assuming the Phillies still run a real lineup out there because they could catch the Padres for the higher wild card.
You're talking about the Mets or the Cards as far as that draw goes. So probably want to win it, but it's kind of a wash.
Yeah, I'll say I don't know what they'll do. There is a chance that you get the Phillies clinched yesterday lineup.
Yeah,
which would be really good for Verlander.
Yeah, that would create a lot of like 5-inning start upside for Verlander there. So that would be interesting and something to look out for as you're making a decision about your Verlander.
Although I guess there's also like you're either going to get the Phillies clinched yesterday scrub lineup, or you're going to get the Phillies clinched yesterday everybody's hungover lineup.
Also true. Could be that could be a fun one to watch too. Bryce Harper probably did some partying. Let's see on the Astros side of things, going up against Suarez. We talked about there's definitely enough contact. He does walk a few too many hitters, a 1.30 whip with an 8.7% walk rate on the season, but only a 33.8% hard hit, 6.3% barrel, 1.86% home run rate. And he was demonstrably good at all of those things and keeping the ball on the ground last year as well, just with a higher strikeout rate last year. Any reason to grab Astros bats here against them? I think they're a good enough lineup where they can create their own upside against most of these kinds of pitchers. So I usually will go to them. Are you playing Astros bats?
Kind of the same answer as the Yankees. One, it depends on what lineup they actually run out there. Two, I don't like the spot against Suarez, but they are just a good enough, talented enough offense that you can certainly go to them if they're going to be relatively low owned. They are pretty expensive too, though, so that's going to make it tough, especially on a slate where there's pitching that I want to pay for. The top of this order, the top of the projected order, with Altuve, Pena, Alvarez, Bregman, Tucker, all guys that you want to get to, but pretty tough to stack together in terms of salary.
Yeah, definitely expensive, even expensive on FanDuel. Wow, 3 guys in this lineup over 4,000 on FanDuel. Way to go, guys. They made up for it with a bunch of 2,000s on the back end. But it's a team I do like getting to in spots where people aren't going to it. So I'll see where the ownership comes down. And then 2 guys, if I do end up going there, I'm always happy to target the 2 big lefties, Kyle Tucker and Jordan Alvarez, when they're facing a lefty, because it seems like the field just unnecessarily goes away from them. But we just talked about, I just mentioned at the top, all the reasons to maybe not roster hitters against Ranger Suarez. So definitely an interesting spot here. Let's talk about PrizePicks real quick. Daily prop-based contests. There are no sharks. There's nobody like Adam playing over there that he's probably playing there, but you don't have to play against him. That's the good news. And you don't have to play against Alex. You don't have to play against anybody from our site. You're just playing against the universe. You're playing against the outcomes because it's prop based. What you want to do is put together a lineup card. You put together a 5-player lineup card. If you get them all right, that can win you 10 times your entry fee. It's pretty great. We have people killing it all day long over there with our projections. We've got a link in the description below that'll get you 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum and up to $100 deposit match bonus when you sign up and make a deposit with PrizePicks. So if you're even thinking about checking out PrizePicks, take advantage of that. Click the link, get a free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. That'll pay for anything that you put into PrizePicks just to check it out and toy with it. And you're getting a $100 deposit match bonus over there. That's pretty killer. They offer cross-sport entries. So if you like something in baseball, you like something in football, hockey, preseason, whatever's going on, you can put together really interesting cards and you can pick off a lot of really great value. We've got projections up on the site that you can use. It is a great place to play. So go check out PrizePicks. Click the link down there. Take advantage of the free month of Stokastic Platinum and a $100 match deposit bonus over there. 4 games to go. We will talk about the Twins against the White Sox. Josh Winder on the mound for the Twins. I assume not that much is just in him. Lucas Giolito, pitcher that comes up pretty frequently because of A, his performance this year, and then B, how he's been priced because of that performance. I think we've talked about him 2 or 3 times recently. So curious to see where you're at on Giolito here. Any reason to go to Winder before we get into him?
No real reason to go to Winder, I don't think.
I totally agree. What about Giolito? What are we doing with him? 85 on DK, 96 on FanDuel.
Yeah, it just seems kind of neutral to me. The price tag has come up a bit to 8,500. It's not a particularly good strikeout matchup against Minnesota either. But Giolito is still a solid enough pitcher. And, we've talked about it a lot. If you compare Giolito to previous versions of Giolito, then yeah, he's not good. But if you compare him to just your standard $7,500 to $8,500 pitcher, he's fine. 25.7% strikeout percentage is 7th best on the slate. 3.59 xFIP, 4.07 FIP. Those numbers are both fine. He's gotten a bit unlucky, in terms of actual ERA this year. He's had some power issues, but you're just talking about a solid enough pitcher at a price tag where, based on his performance this year, he should be priced in a mediocre matchup. So he's kind of just a guy for me where I would expect him to be pulling 15-ish % ownership, and I would think that's about where he should be.
Makes sense. Yeah. And 96 on FanDuel, the price also going back up a little bit over there. That might make me a little bit more interested if it keeps a little bit of ownership off of him, because everything you just said, I'm just totally on board with. I think this is just too talented a pitcher to get overly worked up and worried about a couple extra barrels that he's given up this year and 2 or 3 percentage points of swinging strike that has really made most of the difference in what he was last year to this year. The xFIP is better than it was last year. So there's a lot of reason to still like Lucas Giolito. I'm hoping that the ownership gets kept down. What about taking Twins bats against him? Decent amount of hard hit rate in that lineup, some barrel rate in there. Not a lot of translation into actual game power for most of these guys. Are you going to Twins bats here?
I'll be really interested in how the ownership for them shakes out, because I don't love picking on Giolito, but he does give up some power. 133 expected ISO to lefties this year, 166 to righties. Again, right-handed power is where he's had issues, but 238 actual ISO, 166 expected. Probably getting at least a little bit unlucky there. But with the Twins, you do have some power upside, and they're also relatively inexpensive. You know, Nick Gordon still 3,300 with MPE. Jose Miranda, 3,800. Good hitting prospect. Correa is always one of the highest upside shortstops. Urshela's got some pop. Whoever's catching, whether it's Gary Sanchez or Ryan Jeffers, is going to look fine. So if Minnesota's not getting ownership, I kind of like using them as value, just because Giolito doesn't have a big margin for error this year. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you could certainly see the Twins run into some home runs against them. But if I think there's a decent chance that their ownership kind of gets elevated because of the fact that they offer some value and they're going to let you get to good pitchers. So really interested in where that ownership comes in. And I kind of just want to do the opposite of the field on Minnesota, I think.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And just looking at the relative pricing across site to site, it's the same story on FanDuel. Carlos Correa, the most expensive player at 3,100, most of the lineup 2,700 or below. So they're going to probably get pushed up on both sites by those value numbers, but that'll be an interesting one to watch for. What about the White Sox going up against a bad pitcher who allows a ton of contact and some run creation?
Yeah, I think the White Sox look pretty decent here. Winder 187 expected ISO, 208 actual to righties this year, 181 expected ISO, 170 actual to lefties. Obviously, the White Sox have been disappointing all season long. This is another game where it looks like it's supposed to be like 60 degrees. So you're in a part of the year where like Josh and I were talking about it yesterday, I think the gap just closes between, where typically you have favorable hitter sparks and then, your pitcher sparks. I think the gap kind of just shrinks because now you have 60-degree weather instead of 85-degree weather in Chicago. But there is still power in this lineup. I hate saying the name Elvis Andrus after the word power, but he has been hitting well this year. He's 4K, like whatever. If you're stacking, he fits in fine. But Jose Abreu, Eloy Jimenez, Gavin Sheets at only 2,500, I think looks really good. Moncada, Vaughn, Grandal. You can make pretty solid White Sox stacks here against Winder.
Yeah, it's a team I still like going to and getting to, and we've talked about it a couple times. I don't think I've actually done well playing them this year, but I'm a sucker for them. I just love bats like Abreu and Jimenez in the middle of that lineup. Elvis Andrus is funny. He had cooled off after that crazy streak. I was reading about it. He was, something like 1 for his last 15 until we made fun of him again the other day. And then he went out and hit a home run that night. Yeah. So just goes to figure. Let's move on. We'll talk about the Giants and the Padres. You had mentioned Carlos Rodon at the top of the show, in our conversation. I think there's a question as to whether or not he's actually going to be in this game. Have you seen anything confirmed? They were talking yesterday that he might not actually make this start. And now I actually have Jarrell Cotton listed as the opener and then a bullpen game. So have you seen Rodon confirmed?
I have not seen anything confirmed either way.
All right, because I originally had him when I put stuff together last night, and then I saw that this morning. So let's talk about it as if it's Rodon.
Well, I'll say just in like a follow-up thought there. Yeah. So one, we don't know who it's going to be. If it is Rodon, there's a really good chance he's not going super deep into this game, because the reason they cited for why it wouldn't be him is that, it's an elevated workload compared to what he's done previously in his career. We know he's had arm issues before. So it kind of, to me, seems like either they're going to skip him or they're going to be like, all right, go throw a bullpen, basically. Like, it seems really illogical that they would go from, we might just skip this guy, to Carlos Rodon just threw 8 innings and 100 right. Like, that doesn't make a ton of sense. So I do think that one way or the other, it's going to be pretty difficult to want to get to him, as opposed to, guys like Verlander and Cole.
Yeah, and he's coming in, just punched him in here, 10-1 on DK, 10-8 on FanDuel. So, yeah, you're paying full freight for him if you're going to him. I guess watch the news. If it does come out where they say, hey, he's getting a full start tonight, then we can reconsider, and we'll both be back later in the day to talk about that on two separate shows. So we'll have plenty more information later on that one. What about Sean Manaea on the mound for the Padres on the other side here? Any interest in him?
$6,500 price tag. So, yeah, I guess I have to. We actually have him right now projected as the fourth highest scoring pitcher, third highest if you remove Carlos Rodon. That seems aggressive to me, but I think it's fine. I think probably should be behind like Gallen and Giolito, but it's still functionally going to be the same thing when you're talking about a $6,500 pitcher. I would expect him to be one of the most popular pitchers on the slate. He's sort of Giolito-esque in that he's not performing to the level that we're accustomed to from Sean Manaea, but he's still fine. He's got a 23% strikeout percentage this year, 4.03 xFIP, 4.74 FIP. He has had major home run issues, 1.78 home runs per nine, but he's 6,500. Like, how much cheaper can you possibly make somebody that has Manaea's track record and underlying talent? He's probably going to face a lot of right-handed hitters here. 24.3% strikeout percentage against righties, has allowed a 228 actual ISO and 186 expected ISO. I'm not saying he's safe or anything like that, but he's $6,500.
Yeah, if at some point last year you told me that Sean Manaea was 6,500, I would have asked if he was pitching with his right arm. I think it's ridiculous to see him at that price. So you got to love it. The ownership just dropped a minute ago, so he's 33.3% owned. It looks like over on DK, second highest behind Garrett Cole, who's up into the 40s, 24.1% on FanDuel at 8,100. So Sean Manaea definitely going to be popular here today, but I think at the price, it's totally justifiable in this matchup. Any love for the Giants bats? Any of the righties in that matchup? We know they do have some platoon switching and everything that they like to do here. So what are you doing with the Giants?
I do like the Giants in tournaments because, for one, Manaea has had those power issues to right-handed bats this year. For two, he's going to pull ownership. So if the Giants do just come out there and light him up, you're passing a lot of the field. The biggest concern is that Sean Manaea is still not a bad pitcher. The second biggest concern is the pinch hit risk, where Austin Slater probably gets pinch hit for. But I do think that you've kind of seen that drop off a little bit as the Giants have gotten banged up a little bit. But like when you think about the lineup, Wilmer Flores, assuming he's starting, he plays against righties. JD Davis has been playing against righties recently, so I don't think he's necessarily the for sure, pinch hit risk that he was a month or two ago. Tyro Estrada has been playing against righties. David Villar is typically playing against righties. There might be a little bit less pinch hit risk here than there normally is. I do like the idea of getting to the Giants. Right now, we have them in the top stacks tool. We don't have them in the top stacks tool, so never mind. There's a good chance.
Not pulling a ton of ownership with the numbers I'm looking at. Pretty much everybody in the single digits. Austin Slater up top at 10% on DK. Everybody else low to mid single digits. So
I was gonna say that's kind of my expectation with all the ownership going to Manaea. So I do like the Giants in tournaments. You have to deal with the pinch hit risk, but again, I don't think it's as big a deal as it probably has been. It's still there. Like Slater probably gets pinch hit for. Bryce Johnson, if he's in the lineup, probably gets pinch hit for. Other than that, I think you're probably safe.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And yeah, you mentioned one of the bats that I really like getting to in that lineup is JD Davis, 2,500 at third base on FanDuel, 56% hard hit and a 16.6% barrel over his 352 plate appearances. That's just fantastic contact. So I'm always happy to get to him, and then building around the edges with the Estradas and guys like that of the world. Padres on the other side, any love for them going up against most likely a bullpen, maybe a limited Rodon?
Yeah, it depends on the ownership because, I don't like going up against Carlos Rodon, obviously. If we're assuming it's the bullpen, I still don't love going up against bullpen games, but it is still a really good or really talented Padres lineup. And if they're not going to pull much ownership, then I am interested. Right now we have them at 3% projected ownership, but I don't even know who we're expecting to pitch or anything like that. So definitely going to be a spot to pay attention to later on, when we come back for the deeper dive live before lock. But if they're low owned, I do think they're a good tournament stack.
Makes sense. And yeah, everybody projected low owned except Juan Soto on FanDuel because he's only 3,600. He's 21% owned, but that's a separate issue. Ty, we're going to skip the full Hall of Fame thing, but guys, if you want to get a free month of Stokastic plus Platinum, if you finish in a tournament with more than 5,000 entries and you got our logo on your little thingy there and you're in the top 3, tweet it at Stokastic Hall of Fame. The guys will set you up with a free month of Platinum. Easy. Los Angeles Angels, Michael Lorenzen on the hill, taking on the Oakland Athletics with Cole Irvin, the lefty. Any love for either of these pitchers?
Yeah, Lorenzen at
Lorenzen?
6,800. He just projects pretty well for that price tag. We have him at 15.6 DraftKings points at 6,800. Not the same level as Mania, but also probably won't get the same ownership as Mania. So I think that he's, a reasonable pivot. He's not a great strikeout pitcher. He's not a great pitcher in any sense of the word, but 20.2% strikeout percentage, 4.2 xFIP, favorable park shift, pitching in Oakland, facing the A's. I think he's fine. Irvin's a more difficult sell. You do have him at home, which is nice because he's certainly benefited from pitching there from a right-handed power standpoint. But between the two, I would get to Lorenzen first.
Yeah, I agree. I would chase Lorenzen more, but I don't love either pitcher. I do love the matchup for Lorenzen, so that'll probably make him trickle into some of my lineups. 8,300 on FanDuel, only 2.6% owned. I was going to say probably playable at that level. Irvin actually more expensive on FanDuel at 8,600, which is weird. I don't need any shares of that. Probably will end up with some Angels bats on the other side of that equation, depending on the lineup. But Trout, Ohtani, Ward, Rendon back in the lineup. Rendon still dead minimum 2,000 on FanDuel, by the way, at third base, which is nice. Any love for the Angels?
Yeah, I think they look pretty good here. The negative is the park, but Cole Irvin this year against right-handed hitters, only an 18.5% strikeout percentage, 180 actual ISO, 211 expected. Again, I would certainly like them a lot more if this game were in Anaheim, but it goes without saying Mike Trout's really good. Renjifo's getting expensive, but he's been good. He has multi-position eligibility. Taylor Ward's reasonably priced. Rendon is cheap. Joe Adell's got power and massive strikeout ability, but he's facing a pitcher that doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. Certainly has the power to hit it out of Oakland. The guy can hit the ball a mile. So I like getting to the Angels here. Goes without saying, Shohei Ohtani, lefty, but who cares? He's really good as well.
Yeah.
Certainly like the Angels here.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if anybody can strike out 4 times against Cole Irvin, it's Joe Adell, but he could also hit a couple home runs. So I'm with you on that. And yeah, if you're looking at FanDuel pricing, you can get Rendon for the dead minimum, like I mentioned, and you can also have Renifo with multi-position at second and third for 2,500. So that's pretty nice. Easy to get to on FanDuel. Any love for the A's? Not a good team. Not a team I like getting to all that much.
No, it's pretty difficult to make a real case for them. Lorenzen this year, one, it's a tough park to hit in. Lorenzen against righties this year, allowing a 111 expected ISO. Lefties have a 160 expected ISO, but he also somebody that I would think he should be doing better, it seems like. He's got a really good changeup, gets a lot of swings and misses on it, doesn't give up any power on it. So I think it's probably just a matter with him of if he's working behind in counts and has to throw his fastball, then lefties are going to hit him hard. But if he's able to work even or ahead in counts, they're going to have a tough time against him, I think, in individual starts. So pretty difficult for me to want to get to the A's.
Okay. Yep. Makes sense. I'm with you on that. And it looks like they're drawing a little ownership. Like the last thing I want is the A's when they're a little bit popular. So yeah, that's a hard pass for me. Last game on deck, Colorado Rockies in Los Angeles, taking on the Dodgers. Ryan Feltner going for the Rockies, 5,700 on DK, 68 on FanDuel. Julio Urias, 9,000 on DK, 10.4 on FanDuel, 20% owned on DK. Not that bad. 9.8% on FanDuel. Gotta like that. Assuming no Feltner for you, correct me if I'm wrong, but what do we think of the Dodgers pitcher here?
Yeah, no Feltner for me. So is it Urias followed by Heaney?
Oh, is it? I had missed that.
I'm not positive.
Okay. If that's the case, then that ownership might be a little high.
Heaney is slated as of October 1st. Heaney is slated to pitch behind Urias Tuesday against the Rockies. I mean, I have no idea what to do with that other than I don't think you can roster either guy.
Yeah, that's
Heaney's 10.4, Urias is 9K. What do you 4 innings from both probably?
Yeah, if so, yeah, that seems pretty untenable. I was just looking and there was Dave Roberts talks about limiting Urias a mid-Cy Young talk, but it's not specific to this game. It's just random nonsense from SI. So yeah, I guess that makes him unplayable. I mean,
they really limit him and Urias throws 2 innings and then you get 6 from Heaney. Right. That would be the best case. And then Heaney, I guess, could get there at 10.4, but I'm just going to end up avoiding it.
All right. So come back later in the day because both Adam and I are going to be back for the deeper dive and live before lock. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of info on that. Rockies bats, any love for them against the pitching combo there?
Yeah. I mean, the Dodgers look, from the Rockies. No. Just some good pitching.
Dodgers bats then against Feltner.
Seems like Dodgers bats are going to look great. I assume it's going to be, right now it's projected to be pretty similar to last night, though, where the Dodgers are just pulling a ton of ownership. They're clearly the best stack in terms of chances of success, but also going over-owned here. It is still a 10-game slate. So on the one hand, there haven't really been many offenses that I've loved. It's just a lot of like quality pitching today. And so that makes the Dodgers stand out even more. But on the other hand, the ownership is certainly there, and there's going to be other offenses that do well. So the Dodgers look great. It's just a matter of paying attention to the ownership in your lineup and trying to find ways to balance it out.
Yep. And it's a team I always bring up. The back end of this lineup is as good as a lot of top ends and a lot of other lineups in terms of DFS upside, at least. And you get guys like Joey Gallo snuck into the lineup late last night. He was 5% owned on FanDuel. I don't think he did anything, but you can grab a spot like that to offset a little bit of the popularity if something like that happens. So always worth keeping an eye on the confirmed Dodgers lineup toward the end there. And that brings us right up to the end of the show. We've got something coming up right behind us. So let's knock out the last little bit of business. Hit the hit the subscribe. We really appreciate everybody hanging out. Adam had a great show. I had an okay show. I stumbled over a lot of my words, but you can stick with the channel here. 11 o'clock, we've got NFL strategy show and first look coming up with Lofty and Ben. We've got a PGA strategy show coming up from 1 to 2 with Ben and Jeff. Then Josh is coming up with Adam coming right back at 4:45 for the deeper dive for baseball. And then I'll be back with Greg for the live before lock for baseball. So stick around. We will catch you guys throughout the day. And we'll see you later.